Thank you. All right, I call to order the, Monday, March 27th, 2023 meeting of the Cumberland Town Council. We did have a budget workshop at 5 o'clock just before this, and just a reminder that those will continue ahead of the next two council meetings as well. So feel free to come and listen in. It's a good way to learn about kind of the budgeting process and kind of how we're thinking through kind of the next year. So with that, first order of business is our approval of minutes from March 13th, 2023.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments on the minute? All those in favor?
One abstention.
Next is our manager's report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Our first item under manager's report tonight is we've asked our representative, Steve Moriarty, to come and present a legislative sentiment. And our Senator, Teresa Pierce, is here as well.
Thank you, Bill. Madam Chair, members of the council, good evening. I'm here with my colleague from the legislature, Senator Teresa Pierce from Falmouth, but who serves as Cumberland's state senator. And as you probably know, I think I've been both before you and the school board a number of times to present sentiments, and usually therefore winning teams or outstanding personal performances, and sometimes for historical events. This is a bit different. This is a sentiment in memory of one of Cumberland's truly great historical figures of recent vintage. We all regret the passing of Harlan Story, and the sentiment was prepared at my request with Teresa's assistance, and I'll be presenting that tonight to Carol and the members of her family, and we'll read it to you and share this tonight. So it begins. State of Maine, in memoriam, whereas the 131st legislature has learned with deep regret of the death of Harlan E. Story of Cumberland. Mr. Story was a veteran of the United States Army. He worked as a truck driver throughout his career. A dedicated public service, he served as a member and the last chairman of the Cumberland Board of Selectmen. He was instrumental in the drive to establish a town council, town manager form of government to better meet the needs of the growing community. And the change was approved by the voters in 1972. He was then elected to the first town council and held elective office for a combined total of over 30 years. He was the last surviving member of the Board of Selectmen and that first town council. Mr. Story will be long remembered and sadly missed by his wife of 64 years, Carol, his family and friends, and all those whose lives he touched. Therefore, be it resolved that we, the members of the Senate and House of Representatives, pause in a moment of understanding and prayer to inscribe this token of sympathy and condolence to all who share this great loss, and respectfully request that when the legislature adjourns this date, you do so in honor and lasting tribute to Harlan E. Story Sr. The sentiment is dated March 9 and is signed by the Speaker of the House and the President of the Senate. And I'm pleased to present this to Carol. I know that you will share it with all the members of your family, and perhaps with the other councilors as well.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And I just want to I'll just wrap up by saying it was one of the great honors of my life, particularly that phase in public service, to have served with Harlan here as a member of the town council for several years. A true patriarch of the town, and a great figure. We're going to miss him, and Shirley continues the legacy of service. Remarkable.
Thank you, Steve.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Our next item is Councilor Segrist will give us an update of the Legislative Policy Committee that he serves on in Augusta.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Manager. That's a very tough tough act to follow. Thank you, Representative Moriarty and Senator Peirce, for that. As all of you know, I attend usually about once a month a legislative policy committee meeting at Maine Municipal Association's headquarters in Augusta, the purpose of which is to really monitor all the different bills that are coming through the House and the Senate to try to figure out whether they have some type of municipal impact. I can tell you we meet from usually 10 a.m. until about 4 p.m. straight, with maybe 30 minutes as a lunch break. And every single one of those minutes is spent going over legislation piece after legislation piece. They're broken up into different categories. This last week we focused on energy, utilities, and technology-related legislation, human resources-related legislation, insurance, labor-related legislation, and one of the biggest buckets is tax-related legislation. We talked tonight about LD 290. The stabilization tax that's currently in place. I know we've got, I think, Mr. Manager, you mentioned about 700 folks who have signed up for that. But I think the big question for the legislature is, how is LD 290 going to continue? Is it going to be modified? Are there other pieces of legislation, maybe an increase to the homestead exemption from $25,000 to $75,000 that will maybe taking its place? So there's a lot of talk there in terms of what the LPC supports and what it does not support. There's also cannabis-related legislation, education-related legislation, and then big movements in the election area in terms of validating voters and things of that nature. Some of the big takeaways, I think, just had to do with potential taxation, and there was also some public safety-related legislation. I'd be happy to share the specific list with anybody who is interested. I still think we have about 2 meetings and 700 bills to go. One of the issues we're running into, I think there's been a very large increase in concept drafts that have been put out that don't have a lot of detail to them yet, so that it's difficult for us to put a position together on those pieces of legislation. But we have 2 meetings left, and I will keep people posted. So that's where we're at.
Thank you.
And I'll save additional comments till the end. So,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you. Next is public discussion. Public discussion is for comments on items that are not on the agenda. Comments are limited to 5 minutes per person. Rebuttal comments will be limited to 2 minutes. Public discussion topics may be brought up again under new business for further council discussion. Is there anyone here this evening who would like to comment under public discussion? Please step up. And please just state your name and address.
Hello, my name is Joyce Bond, and I'm a longtime resident of West Cumberland on Blackstrap Road. And I'm here to express my opinion on the article that was published on March 22nd in the Northern Forecaster about the plans for new residential units in Cumberland. I am extremely disappointed in the direction being taken by those who are guiding this town. Mr. Segrest, you were quoted in the article as saying, "We realize that many residents in Cumberland are really struggling with the affordability of housing." What you seem to have missed is that many of us are not struggling with the affordability of new housing. We're struggling with the ability to afford the housing we currently have. Our taxes are too high. Adding more residents only adds to the cost of running this town. Not focusing on bringing commercial businesses into this town to help balance the tax load has been an ongoing failure of this whole town. We do not need 250 more housing units in this town within the ridiculous time frame of 3 to 5 years as proposed by the task force. Knowing this town's schools are already overcrowded, how can you be so irresponsible as to propose over 250 new units that will bring at least 50 more new students? These students are going to be beyond what was already projected by MSAD 51 for its upcoming enrollment. Perhaps it's time for us to put the brakes on new housing until we stabilize our school's environment and needs, and then maybe put into place a plan that will not outgrow our schools. Thank you.
Yep, go ahead, Terry.
Good evening. I'm Terry Maloney Kelly. I live at Maloney's Ridgeway in West Cumberland. I, too, am here to share my thoughts about the article in the newspaper for which I have lost a lot of sleep, quite frankly. Affordability of Cumberland and housing in particular is a crisis in our town. Cumberland's impact has been acutely driven by the attraction and growth of our school system, the volume and beauty of our parks and open spaces, and our high-end housing development over the past 10 to 15 years. The economic gap has widened disproportionately as a result. We currently have 400 to 500 students in the MSAD currently unhoused adequately. We have no solution yet for a new school that we're looking at probably $100 million or more. It costs $21,000 a year to put one child through the school system for 1 year. It takes 2 to 3 households without children in the system to support one of these children. The housing units that have been added in the past decade has focused on single-family units. It is estimated that 80 to 90% of the existing homes that have turned over in the past 10 years now have children in them. We are way out of balance. Even our long-term seniors have been adversely affected by our growth. It was documented almost 10 years ago by a survey that affordable housing was needed for seniors. What did our community do? Well, we put in a high-end senior housing unit, which was way out of the reach of most of our seniors who needed housing at that time. Many of them have now either passed or had to move on because of their inability to stay here. I know our family has now faced the heartbreaking reality that we are at the end of an era. We will no longer be able to continue our multi-generational legacy here in this town because of the affordability of Cumberland. I personally find myself, especially after reading this article, questioning the longevity of my ability to stay here. And never in my life did I expect that I would be facing this kind of a reality. We are long overdue for senior affordable housing projects, and I do believe that the project for 55 units will begin to address this. However, it's yet to be determined if it's going to be affordable. The financing has not been secured for that. I also think it's a little unfortunate that that project is being placed so far away from our town center, where the activities and the support system will be for the seniors that come to live here or want to move and stay in the town. The multi-unit housing being proposed on Drown Road, in my opinion, of 110 units is excessive. Why do we have to be so grandiose? It's been our challenge for a long time. To me, it feels like you're trying to bring in folks, and I understand what you're trying to do, I really do. You're trying to bring in folks that cannot afford to come here right now. But you know what? I feel like you're trading us. I am one of those folks, one of those middle-class folks who's trying to stay here, and I feel like you're just going to trade one of us for another who day one is going to have a hard time financially staying in Cumberland. We've had a crisis of asylum seekers now for over 5 years. We've had a need for temporary housing for a long time. I have watched long-time renters in our community be forced out because of the ability for a landlord to get higher rents. They are no longer members of our community, but they were members and active members of our community. The fact that this temporary housing is contingent upon a large project is something I cannot support, but I am the first person, if you know me, to step up and give a hand up to somebody in need. But this is just not sustainable. The last proposal for the development in West Cumberland, it's not funny, but it is kind of funny to me. You're proposing 60 housing units and 35 rentals. About 15 years ago, some of you will remember, our town leadership went through quite a process of time to reopen the industrial properties in that end of town, including for this one particular business owner, at the expense of many citizens. Now you want to help one of these property owners to change his industrial operation to residential housing that will have a significant financial tax burden on our community. The potential for another 100 to 200 students in a school system that cannot accommodate what we already have. And I thought it was our town's pledge to continue to try to build business tax base. If it is, why would you take a business piece of property and flip it over to residential housing? I'm asking that you really consider all of these things. And I know it's a tough, tough place to be. But I feel almost invisible. We've become almost invisible to my town. And it's a very emotional thing for me. I don't know how you correct it, but I don't see these proposals leveling anything off. And I really feel it's just going to exacerbate the moving out of those of us, middle and lower class, who just don't have the means to take on the additional burden that continues to face us. Thank you.
Mr. Manager, hold on just one second. Can I just ask you a favor? I want folks, and I think there's a lot of folks here this evening on this topic, and some are related to the TIF, which is an agenda item and not. I think it would be really helpful for everyone if you could just do a quick highlight of kind of what of those three kind of projects that were mentioned in that forecaster article, kind of where are we and kind of what is a active project versus what is a potential very hypothetical that we may or may not have any details on. I think that would be helpful for everyone. Don't have to go into a ton of detail, but I think just to set the stage of all three, kind of what are we talking about here
So-
before getting into any type of TIF topic.
The first project on Route 1 is our 55 units of 55 and older senior housing. That would be at 60% of the average median income for the Cumberland and Portland metro area. So folks would be able to rent that if they were 55 or older and met a certain income criteria. And that was approved by the planning board, and the Xanton Corporation is waiting for funding through MISHA, which would be through LIHTC bonds sales that they would accomplish that. And it's received a lot of positive support at the Maine State Housing Association, which is MISHA, and they are looking to potentially have funding secured by this summer. And if that's the case, that would probably be at least another year or 18 months before construction would start. The project we're talking about tonight is in TIF District 8, which would be right here in Cumberland Center, and that would incorporate an amendment to the Ocean View TIF and adding lands that are presently behind Town Hall and off of Stiles Way, where we have 10 acres of land presently located that's would be transference for recreation space. That is what the first agenda item is about tonight, and we'll be getting into more detail as I go into that presentation. The third project that is not before us tonight and has not come to the planning board is a project that would potentially happen in West Cumberland in the old Blue Rock gravel pit. That pit has been bounced around many times with a lot of different projects, and the proximity to the groundwater table is very shallow. It's probably less than 5 feet in many places. That would have to be rectified before any project could go in there. If you remember, many of you weren't here when this presentation was made to us, that John Seavey from Seavey Mahar, a groundwater hydrologist, came to us and said, you would be better having housing units in that pit versus a manufacturing facility that you didn't know what was in there because of the contamination to the aquifer. That aquifer in West Cumberland is 5 billion gallons. B, not M, B with a billion. It's tremendous. It's one of the biggest aquifers in our area. We have basically looked at trying to protect that aquifer by extending the water mains out all the way to West Cumberland to the fire station now. Part of our project plan for next summer is to bring that water main up Blackstrap Road to the other side of the turnpike, which would allow development in that gravel pit of potentially 40 or 50 homes. The developer has agreed to make 60% of those at an affordable rate. And that affordability is defined by Maine State Housing Authority. And that, that number for Cumberland is a crazy number. You have to multiply, I think it's somewhere around $130,000 for a family income. So a family that combined, husband, wife, everybody in the family was at least 130 or under, would be eligible to buy home, at least 60% of the homes in that development. And that is affordability is defined by where you get your money from, and we have been using MISHA only because they are the standard in Maine, Maine State Housing Authority for affordable housing and affordable housing development. That project is not before us. It's not before the planning board. It's in concept phase only. The developer is willing to do that because his commitment is to try to build homes for people that work for him instead of millionaires. And he has seen, he's seen some good times and he'd like to give back. And we're fortunate to have somebody to work with that's willing to do that. So when I tell you this number, it's going to scare all of you, but affordability today is almost a $400,000 house. And 60% of those homes would be less than 405. And that's, I guess, the best we can hope for on the affordability range. And that's reality today. That's reality. So that project won't probably come before the planning board until sometime this summer. But those will be under your rules and ordinances. You've allowed for a affordable housing overlay district in West Cumberland to allow for additional density, and those are the rules that'll be followed. So those are the three different types of projects that have been talked about tonight, but only one is before you on item 1, and that'll be the one we talk about in TIF District 8.
Thank you.
And that action tonight is only to amend this to allow this to happen. We don't have a proposal for you tonight. That would have to be at a next council meeting for direction to me and my staff to move forward for RFPs and the like.
Right. So just if I say that back to you, on Route 1, approved project in process of securing financing to start construction. Item tonight, amending a TIF district that would then start a process potentially of understanding and laying out a project in this area. We don't have those details yet. And then third, in West Cumberland, again, a little more where we've got someone that's interested, but again, no definite plans or details solidified before a planning board ready to go forward.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. Hopefully that was helpful for just everyone, because I think that could have gotten lost in that article too. Please go ahead.
Good evening, Tim Mahalik, 31 Shady Run Lane, 44-year resident of the town. I wonder if Poland Spring would be interested in tapping into that aquifer. Maybe that would be a nice industrial use, especially if there's no PFAS. But I just wanted to say it appears from the article, and I haven't been at other meetings, that a single survey was misinterpreted. And it also seems the council maybe is disregarding the comprehensive plan, which has had multiple inputs over many years. I know Bob Vale's been involved in it. And it spoke about Cumberland Center as being a small town center, encouraging small businesses, and keeping just a small, friendly town. It never included, said they spoke about the affordability for them of staying in their own homes. and not for hundreds of new residents. And I know thank the council members who responded to an email that I sent where we talked about the cost of the project. And the manager was quoted as saying he wasn't sure how much town money will be involved. I've done decades of commercial real estate lending. Believe me, the town will have to pay some money, probably. There's always some costs that come up. But the indirect cost will probably be far greater than the direct costs the town will have to pay. And I would urge the council members to visit other low-income projects in other towns such as Biddeford and Westbrook and look at the increase in crime, police calls, drug use calls, welfare needs, English as a second language in schools. And other comments have been made on a Facebook page where we don't have these sort of services located in this town. Moreover, when you compare our town and our revenue base with a city such as Portland, 50% of Portland's revenue comes from sources other than resident property tax payers. So we don't have the commercial buildings or the small businesses that the town comprehensive plan urged us to implement. In times past, when I've come to the council, I was always told, well, it's not this town council's fault in terms of taxes or tax increases. It's the school budget. So last month, I attended a school board meeting, and I was told, when I questioned why we couldn't continue as we were promised 10 years ago to have all the schools on a single campus, that the town council told them that they could not add school space to the existing campus. However, we can add multiple high-rise buildings with hundreds of new low-income residents just across the street. So I'm not seeing the cooperation. You know, I don't see the cooperation in the past. We had a school, I know this is getting a little off base, but the town residents feel this at the Drown Road that was abandoned after less than 20 years, and it was turned into a affordable housing project. And now there's not cooperation in terms of helping the school district locate additional space on the single campus. So we've done 4 of these affordable projects already. There shouldn't be pressure to do it. It's certainly not at this scale, which disregards the town comprehensive plan and does not preserve the character of the town. Lastly, I think before you vote on anything, you should request that the town council confirm what the direct cost and the indirect cost of these projects will be. And again, you can look at other municipalities and see what their indirect costs are and report this back to the council before you make any decision that will further saddle its taxpayers with unknown cost that in the press release have not been quantified by the town manager. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to be clear on one kind of comment, and again, I don't know because I wasn't at the meeting, but to be clear, when the school board presented an option to have additional school on the campus, it wasn't the campus that was the issue and adding the building. It was the safety and Maine DOT, I think, was saying we would have had to kind of widen the roads around campus because of the traffic. And so it was exactly that small town charm that you're hoping to preserve, that I think when we looked at the construction impact and the traffic impact in the center, that was our guidance to say we think that's a non-starter.
If we're
relative.
serious about going green, simply prohibit students from bringing their cars to school. But secondly, we specifically discussed that cost, and the person from Oak Associates was there. It would only cost $500,000, so we're not talking about a big change. Certainly, there'll probably be more traffic from the hundreds of low-income residents than that 500,000. And the school board went on to say, we have to spend 500,000. But to put the school in North Yarmouth, they have to build a road that's 1.5 miles long. They have to extend 3-phase power. They have to extend water and sewer and probably some additional, so those costs are probably quadruple, if not quintuple, the 500,000. So I don't think that's I think there's some disingenuousness being exhibited here, but I just want to respond to that. Thank you.
Yeah, again, it wasn't the cost, it was what it would do to the center of our town. That you'd have multi-lanes on main streets and around Tuttle Road, and in order to absorb the traffic, and that was more. So not really.
I think
not as much cost.
500,000 gets you a couple of turn lanes.
It looks like you have something you need to say, Mr. Vale.
I'm not sure that I favored taking the cemetery up on Main Street and relocating that.
What does that have to do with anything?
It has to do a lot with everything, and we talk about the nature of the town. You know, I can tell you that the citizens of Cumberland and North Yarmouth voted to close 2 perfectly good schools, Drown Road, North Yarmouth Memorial, and now we're talking about where we are today. You don't have to drive around the campus very much to see that there is no space on the current campus for another school building. It doesn't make any sense for the future. It's short-sighted. It doesn't involve any long-time planning for what this community is going to look like in 5, 10, 50 years. And I can tell you that the council has worked with the school to address where the new school can or may be located, and certainly with a little bit longer vision than just a Band-Aid. I think that you should be.
But you're not working with them by building more new housing that will bring hundreds of new students and exacerbate the problem.
Let's not be that short-sighted either. You know.
I know, we're getting off base.
We are getting off base. This is not the community that I grew up with. This is not the community that you spent 44 years in, and it is never going to be again. We would all like to return to the beauty of our youth, but it's not going to happen. So.
But we spent thousands of dollars putting together a comprehensive plan. We should give that a little closer look before we make this vote. And we should get these costs quantified. I think.
We have not.
Hold on one second. If you're gonna, so you can have another kind of minute rebuttal, but if you wouldn't mind stepping to the mic so
Yeah,
folks
so
at
folks at
home
home
can
can hear it as
you.
well.
Tim, we have not put the town's money at risk 1 nickel yet.
But I'm saying,
So
before you vote,
before you
please
clear that.
get these costs quantified. And
What we're
please,
voting on tonight is not
please-
dollar associated.
well, but once you let the camel's nose under the tent, then you say we can't stop now. So, but you're of the belief that the school cannot expand. I think others would differ, and certainly other land use architects would differ. But beyond that, these plans will exacerbate the problem. At this time, this is not the time. And one thing, Mr. Chairman, when you're up at the Augusta, please, the $73 million or $100 million question, a new school in most communities gets 85% state subsidy. And everyone seems to be throwing that out the window. Isn't there a way for more cooperation so we gather that 85% subsidy?
So can I briefly respond to it? So I've been called out a few times, which I'm happy to discuss. And first off, I want to thank everyone for raising these concerns. This is what the community is all about. This is what democracy is all about. In terms of the school funding, that is something that's dictated by state law. It's my understanding that Scott Poulin and others at the MSAD are actively trying to apply for that funding, and that there's current legislation in Augusta talking about changing the education funding formula. Those bills are still pending right now. Again, I'm not in the legislature, but it's my understanding that that's trying to be changed so there is more funding for schools like Cumberland. So, but one of the issues is we are a wealthy town. And so when you look at the valuation of a town, that's baked into the formula as to whether you get funding. And so it's unfortunate that a lot of towns, their school systems have to almost run to the ground financially until they get to the top of the list to be able to receive that funding. Again, it's my understanding that Scott Poulin and others at the MSAD are actively looking at that. I also want to just generally throw out this concept that I've heard concerns come forward, and they are valid, and I hear all of them, but I want to let people know multiple things can be true at once, right? We can have an issue of needing a broader tax base and needing more businesses to come into our town. We're actively working on that. There's places on Route 100 that we're actively talking to businesses to build new commercial businesses there. There's locations on Route 1 that we're actively talking to businesses to build businesses there. We had a meeting at 4:45 today to talk about extending credit enhancement agreements to a business to try to attract more businesses in this town. So that's true, and that's something we are actively working on. We also can have an issue of needing affordable housing, right? That can be two-pronged, as you kind of mentioned, and others have brought up too. One is, do we have the availability of affordable rentals for people within a certain income bracket? Right now, the Housing Task Force that we just spent 7 months working on came to the conclusion that we just don't have those. We don't have enough of them. Right now in the state of Maine, there's a shortage of about 22,000 units of affordable housing. If you take that number, then you take the population of our town and you figure out, okay, what would our percentage need to be if we were going to contribute to help fix that number? The number would be about 150. And so that's where we started the work, coming down and saying, what would we need to do to carry our weight as a community? If every community in the state of Maine took a little bit of action, could we resolve this issue? So that's one thing we're focusing on. We are also, and Terry, to your point, I see you. I want you to know I see you, and I see others. And we're focused on this issue of how do we make it more affordable, not just for seniors within a certain income bracket or young families moving in, but for everybody in Cumberland. That could be including keeping and maintaining a responsible budget, which we had a budget meeting tonight to make sure we are not unnecessarily adding to that mill increase. That can be putting a piece of legislation before the legislature right now. It's sitting before the tax committee that me and others on the council have helped to draft, to allow municipalities to create their own versions of tax deferral programs so we have more control as to which residents get their property taxes frozen. So we're not left to the whims of the legislature. So that's currently before the tax subcommittee. We'll see what happens with that. But I'm bringing these things up because we can have multiple issues at once. We can also have an issue of needing a larger school. We are a really desirable community, 15 minutes from the largest metropolis in the state of Maine. We have ocean, we have mountains, we have trees, we have great schools. We are a desirable place to live. And with remote work being a reality now, more people are going to move into the town of Cumberland, and we can't necessarily stop that. And so how do you welcome new residents while at the same time taking care of the residents you have, while also maintaining a rural charm and feel? And unfortunately, the way you do that and you make it affordable is usually in a larger development, multi-unit complex. Because what people also don't want is suburban sprawl and 1,000 houses taking over the rural charm and character of their town. And so it's a balancing act, but I want folks to know that when they're raising these issues, not once am I hearing them and saying that's not valid or that's not something we should be focused on. We have to walk and chew gum, and we have to focus on multiple issues at once. So.
Well, I would just like to summarize and then sit down, because I've spoken enough, but review the comprehensive plan, quantify the direct and the indirect cost of hundreds of new low-income residents. And lastly, do not, at this time, exacerbate the school district's problems, which has been so well stated. So if there's ever a time to vote no, it certainly is this time. We don't know the cost, but we do know we're going to cause further problems to the school district. I think it's not a difficult place to be. I think the answer's pretty easy. Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Nicole Nevelis, and I live at 354 Blanchard Road Extension. And, I want to start off by thanking the council for its service, as well as Bill Shane for his service. I too am here because I read the article in the paper, and I appreciate that, Allison, you asked for the additional explanation of where we're at. And, and I think it's great to be able to come in as a community member and just, express some concern, especially since some of this is early on. So I want to start by saying I am 100% an advocate of affordable housing. I did not grow up in a lovely, luxurious town here just like Cumberland. I grew up in southeastern Massachusetts, and the first town I lived in was Brockton, Massachusetts. Nothing like this. And so I can appreciate that I have this beautiful town to live in and that it's safe, and I don't have to worry about a bullet going through my house. Okay? Now, I also know that my parents worked really hard, and we didn't have 2 cars for a long time. And once we finally got a car, it had holes in the bottom of it, and I could see the road as we were driving through it. So I have an extreme amount of empathy for the need for affordable housing. But one of the things to consider is there was an NPR article in Spot a few years ago called Everything is Connected, and it talked about how everything is connected in nature. And one example that they provided was how flight patterns changed for the US Air Force, going over woodlands where there are peepers and frogs. And peepers and frogs will make noise together to try to keep predators from knowing where they are. But once those planes started coming over, it changed the dynamic. And as 1 or 2 peepers would start, birds of prey were able to pick them off. Now, when we think about the volume of housing coming in, there are things that do concern me, and I do appreciate that the council is thinking of this, is that there are implications to this, and the volume of it is more of my concern, not the need of it, because this is affordable housing. $400,000 houses, you're bringing in hard-working families into the community. So that's the people that would be coming in. They're the people I grew up with, like my mom and dad. But I also get concerned when I hear Terry, because my parents are her age, and they busted their butts their whole life, and they want to be in their homes, and they want an affordable situation, an affordable home. So what is interconnected with all of this, with the growth of housing? Well, it's the fabric of this community. And it's the fabric of the look and feel of the community. You may say it's never going to be the way it was again, and you're right, things change. Nobody expected that the pandemic was going to come along and all kinds of people that could work remotely were going to come in. We've had huge technological leaps in infrastructure. And I'm one of those people who came in over 10 years ago because I can work remotely. But also, I was lucky enough to move outside of that urban city that I lived in to a town that used to be like Cumberland. And I'm going to say used to be, because we didn't curb our growth in the early 1990s down in East Bridgewater and West Bridgewater. It used to take me 10 minutes to get from my mother's house where I lived to get to the highway, and then it took me 15 minutes to get up Route 24, so then I would have maybe a half an hour, 45-minute drive into Boston from there. I wanted a better life, and I took a long commute in every day. But then all the farmland sold their land. All of them, because it was attractive and it was a good price. That 10-minute ride now takes me a half an hour. That 15 minutes or so going up Route 24, half hour, 45 minutes with traffic backing up, it's like Talladega Speedway. And I wish I was joking about that. The Big Dig, lived through that. Commuted into the city before, commuted into the city after, and I still sit in that darn tunnel for an hour at times. So how does that have to do with Cumberland now? Well, that's what I see. Having been here for 10 years, that's what I see happening. And I might not be somebody who's deep into the politics and all of the intricacies behind that, but I see the town changing. And so there's that opportunity where everybody is right now to take responsibility and think about, how do we want this town to change? How much more open space do we want to go away? How do we want to continue that charm that it is? Now, when we start to bring in more houses, we bring in more cars. So I did a thumb in the air estimate, so by no means is this scientific, but I looked and said, okay, senior housing, probably 1 car per household. Single family, well, let's guess if they're like my family, maybe they have 2 cars, but they might not. So we'll give a number of 1.5. Same with some rental units and same with Drown Road. So what will happen is the total number of cars is 358 more cars coming through the town. And when you think about West Cumberland, and I especially think about the people on Skillen Road, people coming from Blackstrap to come into the center of town, that's 138 more cars going up and down Skilling. So what else is interconnected to that? We have our police, who already probably hear from somebody like me about the speeding all the time. And crap, I live on Blanchard Road Extension. It's supposed to be this nice, quiet little dead-end road. And yeah, like people like to use that to speed down. So are we going to have additional costs around around to support the influx? And then there is the school, which is, a serious issue. And I want to say that when we do think about the things in our community, we can't think about it from a siloed perspective. We do have to think about what are the impacts. And one of the biggest things I heard when I was asking at the farmer's market, I asked a representative from the school there, and I said, my friend can't afford heating oil for our house. So how are we considering that into the impact of this school budget? And that person's response to me was, well, there are other programs. We just need to solve the problem of the school. Like, okay, look, I hear that Mr. Seagrass is considering those things, and by no means am I projecting that somebody else's opinion is his. And I appreciate that you're saying that you're hearing these things. What I'd like the council to consider some more as we look at growth and as we consider this housing is, what is the interconnectedness with each of these decisions that we make? Because I certainly would like to, in 10-something years, when I'm at that age that I'm thinking of retiring, that I can retire here in Cumberland too. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to move on to legislation and policy.
I think we have another.
Sorry, please go ahead.
Thank you. Arnold Klugman, 7 Bradbury Way. I'd like to state that I personally am in favor of senior housing. I think we need it. I've seen the effect of, the positive effect of having it on Drown Road. And I think we're being ridiculous putting it out on Route 1. All of the services, all of the needs, all of the support is right here. It should be in the center of town to give the people that have the least ability to travel to gain the most from what the town has to offer. I think we're on the first step of committing suicide in the community. I think we're doing things because we want to, we have the right intentions, but I don't think we've done enough overt analysis to see the long-term impacts and the short-term impacts of what it's going to do to the tax base, to the schools, to the potential traffic. There's a tremendous impact of 150 units. And I think we're being short-sighted because we want to help. I don't see every other community stepping up, and they don't have to. But I don't think we've put enough due diligence into the impact. That's why I would say vote against the change to this area. Thank you.
just add one?
Give it a
one-
shot.
Well, I'm just going to add one more comment here. A lot of questions, interconnectedness makes sense, right? That's just a logical conclusion. If there is more housing, potentially there are more families, potentially there are more students, and that would burden the school, understandably. I very proudly supported the vote for the new school. Obviously, that referendum did not pass. I hope that the next one does. But again, as talking about multiple things can be true at once, we had an overcrowding issue at the school prior to this discussion. So even if we took all of these potential projects here today and we threw them out the window, we still needed a new school 8 years ago. If you look at all of the projections and you've gone to any of the school board meetings, that's the analysis. And so to me, again, two things are true. We need a new school. We need more space for the growing community. And so I'm hopeful that people will look at that and they will come up with a solution for that. But we also need more available rental, affordable units for people in this town. So that could be seniors, that could be young families, it could be a variety of both of them. And so all of these, I understand the interconnectedness of them, but the goal of which is to make our community more welcoming and more affordable for people from all walks of life. I do not want to just live in a community that we're pricing everybody out of their own home, but also precluding hardworking families like Nicole talked about from moving in here, so.
Allison, I've just got to add that I greatly respect what Mark says. I disagree 100% with him. We're trying to put lipstick on a pig and tell the people that we're, just by voting this, just change the zone, it has nothing to do with the housing. I just want, before we go into legislation, I just want people to know that this is not a unanimous vote. This is not a slam dunk by the council. There are differing opinions, not just one or two. So I'm looking forward to getting into the legislation, and obviously I'll have a little bit more to say then.
All right, so moving to legislation and policy, 23-025, to hold a public hearing to consider an act on the proposed First Amendment to the Town of Cumberland Tuttle Road Development Project Number 8, Municipal Development Tax Increment Financing District and Development Program as originally designated by the town on December 11th, 2017, and as approved by the Maine Department of Economic and Community Development on May 22nd, 2018, pursuant to the provisions of Chapter 206 of Title 30-A of the Maine Revised Statutes as amended. So again, just to say it again, this item is related to the amendment of the TIF district. And with that, I'm going to actually hand it over to the chair of our TIF committee, Councilor Segrist.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We've been talking about how this is potentially, any future project is potentially funded or incentivized at some point. And so currently in state law, and there are others in the room who I know that could speak to this probably more eloquently than myself, but currently in state law, TIF funding, well, I guess TIF funding has traditionally been used for economic development purposes, right? There are specific reasons or specific areas that you can use tax increment financing funds. There are laws on the books that allow you to use tax increment financing funds for affordable housing. And so one of the things that we have been exploring for the last 7 months, me, Councilor Vail, and the 10 other members of the Housing Task Force, is what are the tools in our legislative toolbox? What do we have as a town to bring forward to hope to incentivize the building of affordable housing? And how do you make something affordable? That's really the key issue here, is how do you keep something affordable and how do you make it affordable? And so with that, one of the tools that the Housing Task Force recommended was amending our TIF district to allow for the use of TIF funds to be put towards affordable housing. And so I believe, Mr. Manager, were you going to speak on something? Go ahead. Okay. And so the goal of today's discussion is to talk about amending the original TIF district to, I believe, remove some of the acreage out of it while also adding acreage to it and permitting the use of some of those funds for affordable housing, should a potential project come forward. So I think that's where we are, and we can certainly, I know we've discussed a lot of these concerns already, but we're happy to talk about them some more.
Mr. Manager, is there anything we didn't hit on or kind of details worth noting as it relates to TIF in general? just to make sure everyone understands. Okay.
So, Madam Chair, to bring this to a discussion of the council, I would make a motion to adopt this amendment, and then we can have a discussion surrounding this. So, I would move to adopt the First Amendment to the Town of Cumberland Tuttle Road Development Project Number 8 Municipal Development Tax Increment Financing District and Development Program as originally designated by the town on December 11th, 2017, and adopt by reference the town council orders included as Exhibit 1 to the materials presented as of the date of this public hearing, which are hereby adopted as if read in full.
I will second that.
Motion and
So-
a second.
I would like the floor, Madam Chair. When I was chair of the council a year or so ago, the offer was made for us to form a housing task force. And unanimously, the council moved forward to create that task force and come back with recommendations. So the recommendations are such as that we have an existing housing authority. Anyways, to make this story short or long, is there are many tools that the town has at its access to create and legislate and fund things. And one of the things that we're using tonight is the TIF fund. So the option before us this evening is to create a opportunity for developers to come forward and present to us an option for a piece of property on the Drown Road School, and at the same time remove the baseball field from there and relocate it down onto Stiles Way and create a few more baseball fields where there is a shortage for the kids to play on. So it's a twofold approach. There's some recreation involved in it, and there's some housing. And how that housing plays out is we're hoping could be some assisted living, some elderly housing, affordable housing. But the thing that we don't have in this community is we don't have any workforce housing. We don't have, if a young teacher comes in, moves into this community, we don't have any place for them to move or live. One of the focus that certainly of my tenure here on this council has been to bring affordable housing to the community. And that's a little bit more encompassing than just saying, I want elderly housing, because I do want elderly housing. In fact, I'd like to see a nursing home built in this community, because I think there's a distinct need for it, and hopefully that will at some time come to fruition also. But in the meantime, we are looking at variable types of housing, and we're going to be looking at different developments, different people that's going to make proposals. Avesta Housing, Westbrook Housing Authority are two of the parties that have been mentioned that will have an opportunity to present their vision to us. This is not something to be afraid of. This is not something to say that the town is going down a rabbit hole that we're never going to return from. I could not afford to buy my own home today if I was forced to return as an outsider and buy into this community. And certainly my son and daughter would not be also. So there is some validity to making affordable housing. One of the tenets of being a fully vested member of a community, of a society, is having secure housing. People that live in cities, inner cities, with the danger of being evicted on a daily basis, a monthly basis, because of whatever issues may befall them, whether it's the fact that they don't have a steady job, that they have health issues. But people who don't have secure housing are not participants in society. And so one of the things that we need to be doing And, I take affront when you say we shouldn't be taking a lead here. Why not? We have every obligation as citizens of this state, of this country, to show leadership. I'm not sitting here to just keep the lights on and the roads plowed. I'm here to move an agenda forward, and that's to provide for other people who are not quite so fortunate. And sometimes that requires us to do a little bit more. It requires us to dig a little bit deeper and show some true grit. So I challenge this council to show that true grit this evening and put a little backbone into what we're doing and to move this the first step forward, because we're going to have some challenges come down the road. We're going to have some real presentations with some real choices that will have some real ideas to it, some real teeth, that we'll have a real project on our hands. But tonight is simply a step in that direction, and there is not a single reason that for us not to take that first step. So,
Yeah,
So-
the question was, can you explain geographically where the ball fields may be relocated to? The answer to that question is nothing set in stone, right? This is all conceptual at this point, but in the event affordable housing units were built in Cumberland Center here, the ball fields would be moved. I believe the current location that's being discussed is the 10-acre parcel off of Stiles Way, where the current brush dump facility is.
We can open this public hearing, or is this?
Not quite yet, but I will in a minute. I guess the one, kind of just to get my thoughts out there, is, we talk about kind of our open space, we talk about the rural character, and that property is privately owned. And so there's nothing stopping those parcels from being sold and developed in accordance with our zoning, but still developed into single housing units with prices that we can't control. And so I think where these proposals and kind of where kind of the direction of the council had been was to say, how can we be more planful and more thoughtful and take some kind of ownership and kind of be able to drive and kind of plan where these developments are happening, and so that it isn't haphazard, and that we are able to ensure that there's housing for all those that want to live in this town. I also think we keep talking about the new residents, and that the housing turnover is happening regardless of what we do. And so, me personally, I feel like this is a way that I am proud to support, because as that housing turnover that I can't control happening, as there is high demand and folks either age out of their homes because they can't maintain a single-family home, there is nowhere for those folks to live in town because we don't have that housing available. Price point regardless, we just don't have that type of housing available. And so for me, it's about how can we, as that kind of uncontrollable turnover is happening, that we can still keep majority of our residents in town, and they feel like they don't have to leave their community simply because their need for housing has changed. So for me, I think where we are in this process, I am very much supportive of continuing to take the steps. I will say I have very much heard kind of the comments around the volume of housing that have been proposed, and again, there's no plan that I'm responding to here. I think it's just the possibility based on kind of the parcel of land and kind of what's possible in that space and what could be supported on that property. But this very much has my vote in favor. But yes, this is a public hearing, so I will open it up for public discussion. Hold on one second, just Mr. Stiles.
Bill Stiles all the way. You made all this discussion, but I'm not sure people are aware of what District 8 is. So you made this discussion, I'm not sure people understand what this involves, and that's all I wanted you to do, is get out to the public and so forth, what we're talking about.
Yeah,
I thought you might want them to know where Stiles Way was.
yeah.
That's
Thank you.
universal knowledge, please.
As the, do you mind, Madam Chair, just for a second? While the town manager pulls this up, for folks who are maybe not as familiar with TIF financing, the general topic is that the state allows you to identify up to, I believe, 5 acres or 5% of acreable land in your town to basically draw a legal line around it and say, hey, this, even though this property is within our town, legally, we're gonna shelter it within a tax increment financing zone. You can't do larger than 5% of your total acreage, that's the limit. So you have to pick and choose where in your town you draw up these different zones that you create these sheltered tax increment financing zones. The purpose of that is you can take the value of your property on day one when you create that zone. Let's say you have an open field. The appraised value of that land, or the appraised value of that land would be $0. So you start with 0 in that zone. And if somebody builds a building that's $5 million, now all of a sudden the value of that zone has gone from 0 to $5 million. But because it's happening within a sheltered district, a tax increment financing zone, it's effectively sheltered from certain taxes. And it gets to grow tax-free, and you can use the revenue from the tax revenue that you receive from those properties for certain specific things. Economic development, running water and sewer lines where you need them, public safety, and affordable housing. And so it's a way that we can not raise the mill rate on folks in terms of what your normal property taxes are. These funds are being generated in a sheltered increment financing zone. This is not being generated from mill rate revenue. It looks like we may have someone. So I thought that would be helpful while Mr. Manager pulls up the zone itself here.
We just want to be clear, it's not tax exemption. It's basically sheltering the taxes generated in that district.
Correct.
To a separate fund other than the general fund. So
Correct.
they're
Thank
not
you
exempt.
for
It's
correcting
just
it. If I said that, I misspoke. Thank you.
Chairman Broder corrected me as well, so. So this is TIF District 8 now in purple. It begins essentially at Greeley Road on the old Godso property that was bought by Ocean View and is being converted into the housing spoken about earlier in the meeting. Here we are at Tuttle Road where the big red arrow is. This yellow block here is the ball fields that are behind the Drown Road School. And this green block is the 10 acres that exists on Stiles Way, which is a part of this larger portion the town purchased years ago from the railroad. This portion here would basically, if approved tonight, would go back into basically it would not be part of the TIF district. It would be eliminated because this is where the current salt shed and brush facility reside. There is no taxable value to that property and will be used for municipal purposes for the foreseeable future. This is that big open field as you come out of the wood lines immediately to your left that exists there. That was offered for a school on 2 occasions, and both were rejected by their building team and architecture team because of its proximity to the railroad. So that's why it was rejected.
Bill, in our documents, it says that we're removing that you just called it a 10-acre portion.
It might be 12.
It's 19.67 acres.
This almost 20 acres is coming out of the district, but we're leaving this 10 acres and adding, I think this is 2 or 3 acres, I'm not sure.
Oh, so the purple below the green is 19 acres you're taking out?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
That's, I think, 32 in total, something like that. Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, we're good.
Thank you. Yep, please.
My name is Reverend Allison Smith, and I serve the Congregational Church right down the street. And I just want to thank the council and the Affordable Task Force for their diligence and thoughtfulness. I am excited about this project. We have the opportunity to look forward, to be accessible, to build in housing opportunities for our residents, who are now perhaps in single-family homes, but they're not going to be able always nor want to be in a single-family home. Oftentimes, there comes a place in your life where you want to move into a smaller, more community home. You downsize and want to be able to stay in this beautiful community. And we have young families who want to work, who want to contribute, who want to build the state of Maine and our community. They're nurses, they're teachers, they're caregivers. They're the people who often will help my mom who has vascular dementia, who will help care for you. And they want to have a home and contribute. And this is an opportunity for us to build a community that is welcoming and accessible and that matters. It is not the time to close the door on people. This is a time for us to move forward with the thoughtfulness that so many people and our town manager are working so hard to diligently think through all of the multiple issues that I don't know about because, I'm just a minister. But they're thinking through all of those pieces, and they're thinking about all of us. And so I just applaud this diligence and this work, and I think we can have this vision and plan and move forward, and I am grateful, and I urge you to support it. Thank you very much for what you do.
Sorry to contradict, but I don't think they know the cost. The last affordable housing project I was involved in, the budget very, very clearly stated the TIF was a reduction in the property tax that the developer paid, that the owner of the property pays. So can we accept that? Can we agree on that? I mean, this is a tax break to a developer. It's
That's
not that-
only,
Well, then, this was a MISHA-approved project, and I don't think you're getting the correct information here. And the second thing, what is it cost to build the new ball field?
Well, just to be clear, we don't have all of the details on that plan. Today before us is the idea to amend the TIF district to include these parcels of land so that in the future, should a realistic and cost-effective and responsible project come forward, we can act on it. We can use the tools of TIF funds
what's
to
the
help make it
average-
more affordable. Because this comes down to the question of how do you make a project affordable? How do you make it affordable when the developer has to buy the land, they have to run the electricity, they have to pay the property taxes, they have to do all of the things, and then they bake those costs into the value of the unit. And if the value of a unit is a single-family house, then just raise the price. But if the value of the unit is multiple units in a single building, the cost of construction goes down. If that developer is also taking advantage of Maine State Housing Authority tax credits, 4%, 8% tax credits, the project becomes immediately more affordable for them. And if you can add legal covenants to those deeds, then you make it affordable for a long period of term from a legal perspective. And so that's why you use TIF funds for these types of things.
Again, a TIF, I've seen a lot of these projects, and a TIF is a reduction in the property tax that the owner of the property pays. I think you should do work on that. I think you should find out what it costs to build the ball field and parking for the ball field. And if there's access for the ball field, there's a lot of cost here. And Bob, you spoke about a lot of platitudes, but the Bill of Rights does not ensure housing. There's one government called the Soviet Union that promised everyone free housing. They got lousy stuff. There's nothing that beats free people doing free things. But why shouldn't we do it? I'll tell you why we shouldn't vote to do it now. The town of Cumberland already has 4 affordable housing projects. The Budds Trail project, the project that they took over from the condo development that borders the middle school and that is dedicated to senior housing. Smalls Brook is affordable housing, in the Drown Road School. The town of Cumberland has already done far more than any other neighboring community in providing affordable housing. So that's 4 reasons why we should vote no. But the other is the 400 students that are housed in trailers at this point. This is not the time. Not when you have 400 students that don't have a place to sit. You don't know the cost, you don't have a place to put the students, and you're talking about a communist vision that we're going to provide housing for everybody because we sit in government seats. It doesn't work. This is not the time. It's silly.
Allison, can I just clarify the no taxes or free taxes? Not everything that gets developed within a TIF district gets tax incentives. We can, within a district, give a business or organization a credit enhancement agreement, which allows us to reduce their property taxes so that they can come into our community. Because they might be hiring people from our community, or they might be, we gave one, I was not in favor of it, we gave one to an Alzheimer's home, a memory care facility off Route 1, so that they would come and provide memory care. Not every property gets developed with tax exemptions or tax reductions. So you are correct that some do, but only the ones we decide to issue credit enhancement agreements to.
Did you have?
But the whole philosophy, let's put it out here, is to reduce taxes for the owner of the property.
Let's give somebody else a
Anything
chance,
else
Tim.
is just lipstick on the pig again.
Yep. Please go ahead. Did you have a question?
Well, I think we've got, go ahead.
Just, go ahead. Go ahead, take.
Okay. Nicole and Reverend, I really love what you both kind of alluded to in terms of the interconnectedness of our community. Current residents, nurses, teachers, seniors, multi-generational housing. I think, and this is really just kind of resonating with me tonight because we have spent, about 2 hours prior to this meeting going kind of line by line through budget items and really understanding how everything is incredibly interconnected. And I can assure you that we take all of that with the deepest kind of level of seriousness that we can. We talk about this, possibly now not being the time. My husband's grandfather is a Holocaust survivor. He fled his home in Vienna, Austria, and was only able to resettle because his community welcomed him, brought him in to the fray. He went on to develop his own business, employed dozens and dozens of people, and gave back to his community. I think that over the years, we are going to be faced with these types of choices as to what type of town do we want to be. What example are we setting for our kids? And tonight I'll be voting in favor of this because I think that the way, and this goes with not doing it for the sake of doing it, but because the hours and hours that have been spent by, Chairman Broder and the group that put in exhaustible hours and effort into kind of creating this framework into the TIF committee and the finance committee and all of the work that's been done by the town to think so seriously as to how do we do this in a way that's going to be affordable and that's not going to put the burden onto the taxpayers, because that's not what we're trying to do. And so I think that as we begin to unpack the project, and as we've mentioned over and over, this is just the first step. Let's at first see what comes to us and have an open mind and look at it and continue to discuss it in a way that's really thoughtful. Because I think that's the type of community that we are, is that we're open-minded and we're willing to have those difficult conversations and unpack things that aren't easy to talk about. That's it for me.
Thanks, Dave. Mr. Broder?
Thank you. Jamie Broder, 14 Old Musket Road. I had the honor of being elected chair of this task force. And we did spend 7 months of looking at the issues and trying to figure out how we could best define the issues and then do something to make it better. We looked at the plan, the comprehensive plan. We looked at the resolutions and the surveys. We looked at other communities. We looked at the needs. And we came to, there were 10 people on this task force. They came from every walk of life, long-term Cumberland residents, new Cumberland residents, retired people, working people, Republicans and Democrats. And you know what? We voted unanimously for this set of recommendations. We had a lot of good discussions. How many? How much? Who? Where would it go? But what we tried to put together is a process and a focus on meeting those needs that's institutional, that's there, that's workable for the long run. And those recommendations were pretty straightforward. But the first thing I would say to you is don't believe everything you read in the newspaper, because sometimes it will lead you astray. Our recommendation was not 250 units, it was 150 units. And I don't know where that 250 came from. It wasn't from anybody on the task force, and it's not in our report. But everybody's in a hoo-ha about a 250, let's do it quick. But it is 150. And that's the first step to sort of get us up to what our current demands are. And those demands are not all people who need to come into town. They are people who are in town that can no longer afford to live here. Secondly, we looked at our housing authority. We have a housing authority. It did one project, 30 years in 1991. It's got a lot of ability to do more. And so that was adopted unanimously. We are in a time of gigantic change, everywhere in everything. And to be able to live here, retire here, have my kids come back from California and live here, we tried. I have a son and a daughter-in-law and 2 grandchildren who live in Los Angeles. They wanted to come home to Maine. We started looking for places for them to live. It was impossible to come back to their home where they grew up. And we've got to provide for those people. We've got to provide for people who are aging out of their homes, can't do it anymore, need another place to go. We need a place for teachers, for fire people, and for police and nurses to be able to live here. All the people I work with on the town staff didn't live in town. They can't afford it. This is a well-thought-through, carefully looked at, and unanimous report of, as I said, Republicans and Democrats, old and young, rich and poor, that this is a direction for the town to go. We have structure. We have an initial group of facilities that could be done, and we have a set aside from all future developments that will continue as we grow to continue affordable housing. This is step number 1, and it's one that simply defines the use of a tool that is very powerful, that doesn't cost the town money. It prevents the town's state and county taxes from going up because it doesn't count in the town valuation. That's the most important benefit to the town of a TIF. And this is the first chance, so we have something that we can say, okay, there are places in town where we think, we the town, think something could work. The something will be defined. But it will be an advantage so that the developing parties, whether they're for-profit or nonprofit developers, can come in and do something for us. We can look at this in two ways. It's a problem and it's going to cause more problems. I've represented developers, nonprofits, of low-income housing for the elderly for 50 years. And there wasn't one place where everybody was upset. We can't do this. We can't have it in our town. And in every time, 10 years later, everybody said, well, why aren't we doing more of this? Why can't we stay here? Why can't we have places like this that has housing and services, and it gives people who want to live here a chance to do it? So I appreciate that, unlike most task force reports, this one hasn't been put up on the shelf. It's been put into action very quickly, and that gives me a sense of the seriousness of the council. And this first step is one that is pretty risk-free, doesn't require you to approve anything, but it does start the process rolling, and it should be done in a careful and measured way, but it should be done.
Allison? Thank you. Jamie, can I ask, Jamie, a couple quick questions?
Sure.
Can you point out a place on the task force report where you address the additional pressure on the school?
No, we did not.
You didn't?
No. We have no way of predicting that.
So
Any more, sir, than you have the ability to predict who's going to build a subdivision and how many children are going to be there. We have the glorious reputation of having the best school system in the city, and it will attract people no matter what, and they will fill up every parcel that's available for housing in this town, and there's plenty.
So one of the most important parts is going to be an increase in the school system, the pressure on, and the task force didn't address it at all.
No, because that wasn't in our mandate. We were told not to do that.
You made a comment a couple minutes ago about TIF money, and you said it's not going to cost the taxpayers anything. You don't consider TIF money tax money?
No, of course it's tax money. It's tax
You just
mon-
said it wasn't going to cost the taxpayers anything.
It can't be used in general funds.
Well, I get that, Mark, but it's still tax money.
Well, but it
To say
says
it's not
the
going to cost
town-
the taxpayers money is crazy.
No, it allows money to be used that you would use to build infrastructure for this purpose. And it sets it aside, and you don't get any additional increase in the town's valuation as a result of that. And so every time you build a house, or somebody builds a house, and the town's valuation goes up and up and up,
Yep.
your state and county taxes go up and up and up, except for TIFs. So you have to calculate the benefit there. There's not a lot of other things that happen that stop new valuation from coming into town from being taxed. It's a good thing.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just add another comment here, too? I think in thinking about 150 units, in working for 7 months on this task force, it became very clear, at least to me, that this isn't a new 150 units. This is getting us caught up to, frankly, where I think we should have been all along. That we have been deficient in terms of building affordable rentals in this town. There are not a sufficient number of them. And had we done 10 a year for the last 15 years, we would be at this number. We just haven't. And so to me, it's catching up to where we should be in terms of trued up affordable housing in this town. I would also say it's very difficult for me to hear the arguments about what are you doing to our schools? Don't you know they're already overcrowded? Which is a logical concern, of course, but from many folks who I know actively not only voted down the proposal for a new school that we just had, but also actively campaigned to kill that new proposal. So if we want to talk about a disingenuous argument, that strikes me as one there, because if you care about building a new school, let's actively campaign and propose a new school so we can get caught up to where we've needed to be for the last 8 years.
So Mark, you're saying we didn't do any projects for the last 10 years?
The last affordable housing project that was built was in 1991.
That's not true. Absolutely not true.
That's under the Cumberland Housing
Absolutely not
Authority?
true. We built 2 different developments on Morrison Hill. We built
Do those still,
Casco Bay Drive.
do those still have affordable housing
No, they
legal
were-
mechanisms pegged
They
to
were
them?
built as affordable housing.
They're not affordable today, so
We
they're not
also
counted.
built we allowed the building of all the apartments on Chelsea Way for additional housing. So to say that we haven't done anything since 1991, absolutely not true.
Okay. I'm not saying that nothing was done since 1991, but what I'm saying is there's not a sufficient number of affordable housing, and more could have been done, and we're trying to play catch up there. Looks like we have some other speakers here.
Rick Doan, Catalpa Lane. I was surprised to hear earlier in the information flow that there is no developer associated with this project, given the degree of specificity of the amendment to the TIF district with the 2 5-story unit, 55 units, et cetera, et cetera. I should also say I was fortunate enough to be part of the Affordable Housing Task Force, and would agree with Jamie and with the council representatives that I think that covered a lot of ground and did a lot of good work. But where did 2 55-unit buildings come from if there isn't some discussion about the way in which it's going to be developed?
I'm happy to jump in. I think what we talked about was what is a potential, what could we fit on the ball fields behind us here, and where could those get relocated if we were going to develop. What we did was basically lay out what the potential was, parking lots, building envelopes, footprints. That's basically just to see if it was even possible. And it is possible to do that, but it hasn't gone through the planning board. We haven't done any environmental impact studies. We haven't done any of the engineering yet, other than to show that it physically can fit. So that was one step. The next step would be, if approved tonight, in 2 weeks, what I would ask the council to do is to authorize a request for proposals for what a developer could come forward and use LIHTC funds, basically low-income housing tax credits, to keep the rental units at 60% of the average median income for our area. And that may be, who knows, it may not be in 2 buildings, it may be in 1 building, it may be only 1 building, but we would put out a request that would go out to, as Bob mentioned, the Westbrook Housing Authority, Avesta, several other developers, Kevin Bunker, the Bateman Corporation, those folks that we have worked with in the past, to see what they would come back. They would present to the council, and then the council would decide what they actually wanted to see there. Following the Housing Task Force, we were trying to basically look at potentially 2 different buildings, only because in my discussions with senior housing developers, it's a different set of needs in a senior housing versus just a regular family housing building. Senior housing may want space for other amenities that could enter there. We do, for instance, visits to the drown room facility with our paramedics, and we do blood pressure checks and those type of things, and different types of rooms that typically you wouldn't see perhaps in a more of a traditional family unit type apartment. So that's where it all headed. It was really to see what could fit, what would work, and that honestly does work. Whether it's authorized or it goes forward voted on by the council is another story, based on what we get from the developers. These developers would build and maintain these units. We would not own them. What we were also trying to do at the same time was to, the tax dollars generated from those 2 units, because they're in the TIF district, we could use those tax dollars to build short-term rental units so that we would have the ability to have either 6 or 12 units that would be managed by the Housing Authority for short-term rentals. That could be for families in transition in or out of the community. That could be for help with asylees when we have these crises. They don't happen all the time, so that would be a short-term fix for us. But when they weren't needed for that type of crisis in our region, then they could be used for others. That would be paid for through either GA benefits or through just conventional rent agreements. So all of those were coming together in that discussion, and that's when we decided to say, well, if we at least begin the process with amending the Affordable Housing TIF district, and then introduce and allow developers to come and say, okay, what can you build and what is physically possible? That would at least start the process. But we didn't want to start the process and not know if that would actually fit on that footprint. And it honestly does, Rick.
Oh, thank you. So even with this amendment as structured, if what emerges is a 60-unit, 3-story single building, you are still eligible under if the TIF amendment, you don't have to build that?
We can build 1 unit, 2 units, no units under that agreement. And it truly lies right on the people in front of you. They are the ones that raise their hand and say, we want to go forward with this project or we don't. And those would be public hearings, just like tonight is.
Right. So one of the aspects of our report, which did not, I think, frankly, get as much attention as it probably should have, is the idea that we wanted the council to look at mechanisms to favor Cumberland residents or people working in Cumberland in the conversation. Is there any part of this amendment that speaks to that?
Not part of the TIF amendment, because we can't write down we're going to discriminate in housing practices. That's kind of illegal. We might go to jail. But let me share with you what we did with Drown Road. And Drown Road is another project that is income restricted. If you're over $44,000 a year, you can't live there. We had 38 units of affordable senior housing at Drown Road, and that is full, which I'm very proud of that the council did when Shirley was chair. We basically brought that forward to convert that from a cost of $100,000 a year to the taxpayers to now we don't pay for that. We get a payment in lieu of taxes of over $24,000 a year from that building. So what we did there is we took all the folks that we had on our waiting list for the Hawthorne Court senior housing. There's 150 people on that waiting list still. And we sent out postcards to all of them a week ahead of time before they went publicly with the advertisement and had an open house for all of them. And we basically showed them and gave them the first opportunity to get to basically rent at Drown Road. And that worked very well. We have a lot of longtime Cumberland residents that live there. We've had some issues. Granted, it's working out some of the growing pains up there, but I think it's worked out very well for many, many people. We will do the same thing here. We would ask that we have the ability to have an open house and advertise locally, and I think that's one of the things they try to do is be selective with the advertisement to try to broadcast those notices out to the Cumberland residents first, ahead of the rest of the public. Because there are state and federal housing funds available that are being used for these projects, we can't make that written in any document or any long-term agreement. But for the most part, most of people that are interested in the housing come here to see my staff and ask, how do we get in those units? And we're handing out information to Drown Road, which we don't control, as well as Hawthorne Court.
Shifting from the question side of it, my feedback as somebody who is going to enjoy potentially at least the upper levels of a 5-story view shed is that I would prefer not to enjoy a 5-story view shed. I think that when we struck the compromises that led to our report, the concept was that you had 3 areas in town, and the operating concept when you divide 3 into 150 is 50-odd units, not 110. And I really just frankly can't get behind the idea that the tallest structures in town are going to be subsidized housing units. It feels like something out of the 60s. So I would really encourage a scaled-down version, and I would also encourage a lot of dialogue around the idea of having temporary shelters for others. It's a noble cause. It is something, though, that I think is distinct from providing affordable housing to people who have connection to the community or wish to move into it. I work next to the family shelter in Portland, and there is real need there, but there are real issues that come with trying to satisfy that need. You're going to be, who's going to administer those apartments? What are you going to do when you have a 6-person family that cannot find other housing? Are you just going to say your month is up and it's time for you to go? I don't know that we're staffed for it. I don't know that we are, I certainly don't think we want to ask Public Works to be evicting people. So I would encourage a lot more dialogue on that aspect of it, but particularly the scale as well. Thank you.
Please go ahead.
Good evening. My name's Sally Bancroft, and I live at 12 October Farm Lane. First of all, I want to thank the council for the deliberations, for the thought that's gone into tonight, and to your commitment to do something in the affordable housing realm. I think it's important that we are an open community that way. We have a lot of people who live in very nice houses. I have a very nice house. I'm happy and blessed to have that. But I also see that there are many people who would like to live in Cumberland who cannot do that. I think when you had the village concept, you had 3 phases for that. And the first phase was, please help me with this, because I think the 3rd phase is the one that talked about affordable housing. And it was, I'm not sure that that part of the village concept ever happened. And am I?
I'm sorry, Sally, I've kind of lost you on that one.
Well, in the village, Shirley, thank you.
The third phase involved where the town garage is, and we talked about maybe moving the town garage. We found no place to relocate the town garage. But what we had envisioned were maybe some
Townhouses.
some long rectangular buildings, perhaps with 3 stories. We talked about 3 stories, where the first story provided maybe some small retail spaces, coffee shops, craft stores, that kind of thing. And the top 2 would be apartments.
Okay,
So
but it
that
wasn't an
was-
affordable, it wasn't an affordable concept?
We were hoping that the shops, putting shops, having a commercial space would offset some of the costs of having the apartments above it.
All right, thank you.
The long and the short of it is, we could not move the town garage.
I
So
remember
that
that.
phase is now
Gone.
long
Right.
gone.
But I guess
But
what
I've been here long enough to remember.
Good. But I think that where there's a will, there's a way. And I think I appreciated what you said, Bob, about your passion around affordable housing and feeling that we do have a responsibility to be as open as we can and as welcoming as we can. So I support the TIF because I think it gives us flexibility, gives you flexibility in creating something that would allow for affordable housing to be here. It isn't in any of the green spaces really that we're talking about, so you're still preserving a lot of the green space, and you've worked very hard also to do that. So to say that you're not being thoughtful of the whole community by looking at affordable housing, I think is really unfair to you. And so I thank you for looking at this holistically. Thank you. Thank you.
It's right down here.
Bill Young, 16 Hedgerow. Heard a lot of emotional stuff tonight, but like Cuba Gooding in the movie Jerry Maguire, show me the money. So I want to know, and I'm pretty versed on the TIF stuff, so I kind of get it. Bill and I have had some interesting discussions about it, so I have a really good grasp on it. But I just wonder what the impact is going to be to the taxpayer. I want to know what the additional infrastructure is going to cost the taxpayer. Are we giving these people a CEA, a credit enhancement, to do this? Why are we giving them money? I don't get that. And why not impact fees? And the biggest question is, why can't people afford to live here any longer? I was really curious about that. What brought us to this point where we actually have to think about affordable housing? I wonder what it was. Can we all go back 10 years and realize that maybe there wasn't a strategic plan, maybe there was some greed, maybe there's a whole bunch of things going on. But here we are. And if you want to look at this holistically, we are looking at it holistically. I am. I'm looking at all the costs coming at us. That's what I'm looking at. So I wonder if we can address these costs, because I haven't heard a word about it yet. Not one word.
So just to say it again, there's no these people. Because there's no these people that we are giving a credit enhancement agreement to, because we don't have a plan in front of us that we would even be considering anything. No one's asked for anything. There's a no one at this point. So right now, from a TIF standpoint, it's just about creating the shelter so that if someone were to come to us with a plan, we would be able to understand how big that plan is, how many units, and be able to understand what are we talking about infrastructure. At this point, there's no numbers for me to share because I don't have a plan that we're voting on.
So are you
tonight.
putting the cart before the horse then?
No, I think we're actually just trying to get the horse to the cart so
Oh,
that we can figure it
I
out.
don't think so. I think you need to know cost before you go forward with stuff like this, because are you planning on giving them a credit enhancement agreement?
There's
Are you
no,
talking-
there's,
just to be
there's
clear-
no them. That's what I'm saying. Is
Well,
there's-
anybody involved in this, excuse me, I'll just change my wording then. Is anybody involved in building this when you go forward? Are you planning on taking some TIF funds and giving them a credit enhancement?
So again, when that partner potentially comes forward with a proposal,
Yep.
we will of course look at all viable options.
You're
to
being,
make the
you're being a
project-
politician, Mark.
To make the project more affordable. If we add property taxes to it, or we say we're gonna charge you an impact fee, or we say every cost that you add gets rolled up into the project, and that developer then needs to recover those costs, and as a result, the price of the unit goes up. And so if you, whatever you can do, these are the mechanisms to try to make something affordable. That's what the entire Housing Task Force was about, is how do you make a project affordable, and how do you keep it affordable?
So what's the impact on the taxpayer?
Currently, from a TIF zone, well, again, we're gonna run these numbers, but currently from a TIF perspective, that money is captured in that TIF zone.
I
from
understand
the
TIFs like
development.
you can't believe.
Okay, so then you should know the answer to it.
Well, I do, but I also
Okay, so-
know that it takes money. Okay, I saw the look. Okay, so.
No, these are all wonderful questions. I want to explore these further. There was no look. It's just, there's no one here that we're talking about providing a TIF. Okay. Okay.
I have a quick question. Is there a TIF zone for the senior citizens project on Route 1? Is it in a TIF?
Yes, that's
It's been in a TIF zone for probably since 2008. That
With
project is.
14 amendments.
Yeah. But it's been in a TIF zone since 2008.
Okay, thank you.
But there's no credit enhancement agreement that has been requested by the builder of that project.
Yes, please go ahead.
I'll try to make it quick. Hi, I'm Steve Brown. I've been in town for 2.5 years. I'm a Maine native. I grew up in Harpswell as a hunter, and I moved to Four Peaks Lane right off of Bradbury Way. And my concern, and no one's brought this up in this meeting, it's going to impact our nature. You know, Maine is famous for its wildlife. And the deer are running around here crazy right now, and we're on the brink of really having a wildlife problem. So is there any studies that have been done addressing our deer population, our turkey population? I think it's beautiful right now, but you got 200 more cars on the road. You know, you go down the road at night and you're scared to hit a deer, and these officers must respond to, they must hit deer all the time, driving at night. So I think, I like the deer, I want them to stay here, but they're not gonna be camped out on a ball field, you know. All I hear is ball field and pavement coming into the town right now, and it's just concerning. So, that's all I have.
Thank you, Steve Moriarty, 12 Oak Street. If you look at the map and you see the area shaded in yellow, if anything happens there at all, I will live in one of the closest houses to that particular spot in town. And I really have no concerns about what you're conceiving of in general at all. Back incidentally, as of this coming July, I will have been in town for 40 years. In the time frame 87 to 89, together with Bob Vail, Peter Bingham, I don't forget who else, Bob. We were on the Comprehensive Plan Committee at that time, and I clearly remember that long ago, affordable housing being discussed as a major problem, and how market rate appreciation was just exploding beyond anybody's anticipation and anybody's control. And so it has been for 40 years. And it comes in cycles. There was a big downturn in 08 to 10. We all remember that. And there was in the late 80s as well. The question was raised, did anybody think about this? Did anybody sort of miss the boat 10 years ago and not taking a step that could have prevented us from being where we are now? Well, you know, it's a free market. It's a free country. It's a free economy. All of our properties have appreciated beyond anybody's expectations. We've all benefited from that, at least on paper. Another thought I wanted to share in terms of the town's planning, in the current comprehensive plan, we have 3 designated growth areas. And the idea behind each, which incidentally are a large part of West Cumberland, this area of Cumberland Center, and the Route 1 corridor. And the idea behind those growth areas was to maintain the rural character of the town as best we could in light of changing market conditions and the freedom of people to sell their property if they choose, and the preservation of rural character and nature and habitat and the like. And so these growth areas were developed and laid out with some specificity such that there could be higher density, more concentration of people, and with particular reference to the center, concentration around the areas that offer a lot of services that people look for, particularly the schools, the library, what little retail and restaurant facilities we enjoy, and not let growth just take place willy-nilly all over town without any consideration as to our rural heritage. So kudos to the town council, the current council and the predecessors for having designated those growth areas. And there's nothing about the current motion, as I understand it, that would violate the concept of the growth area and the purposes for which all 3 were set forth in the first place, all of which were debated publicly and voted on by the then town council. So believe me, over the years that I've been involved, there's been a lot of planning, a number of comprehensive plan committees, a lot of study, all in the midst of a real estate market that is beyond our ability legally or in any other way to control. We live close to the biggest city in the state that offers all the amenities anybody could ask for, and we're a victim of our own success in terms of our schools, our foresight in the acquisition of public property and recreation space, and in the design and layout of our subdivisions and our concentrated areas of residency. So we've done a good job. With that comes a price, and it doesn't get easier as time goes on, as Bob and I can attest to. A lot of this same talk took place in 87 to 89. The prices weren't the same. The issues were.
There is no price if you vote no, Steve. It's less money to the taxpayer. But if you're going to do it, it looks like you're going to do it. I think your own affordable housing member does not agree with the density, you can't restrict who lives there. That would be discrimination. But you can restrict the density. I think people would feel more comfortable if it were limited to 75 units or 80 units. And I think that would fit in with the comprehensive plan. Nowhere in the comprehensive plan did they talk about density of 150 low-income units. I think the least you should do is limit the density to this zone. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Vale?
So I think now that the council has to do their due diligence and deliberations here. We have a contract, if you will, as a citizen, each and every one of us, to support some things that we may not use. I don't really use the police department much, but I am full support of living in a safe community. I try to use the fire department even less, but I'm going to fund a safe and a adequate fire department. I'm past using the schools. My own education at Greeley was probably misspent, like some of my other friends, but my children certainly benefited much better than I did. And I continue to support a fine public school system. And the same thing is true with the library. I don't go to the library, but it's something that I support. Yes, I do go to the library. And so things like that, there's a contract that we have as citizens as to what we support in our community. And so this is not a heavy lift on anybody's part here this evening. This is a opportunity, if you will. This is an opportunity for us to see what comes forward. By approving this TIF designation of some different properties, we allow developers to come forward and make presentations to us and say, this is what we might do with this piece of property. It may be 20 units, it may be 75 units, it could be anything. But without allowing an opportunity to go forward, without a request for a proposal or an RFQ, we'll never know. We will never know what can happen. If you don't apply to college, you don't have to worry about ever getting accepted. If you don't apply to that job, you don't have to worry about ever getting hired. But if we don't move forward and take the chance and see what has the opportunity that it can come from, we don't know what affordable housing, we don't know what workforce housing may look like, or elderly housing, until somebody comes forward and makes a valid, concrete presentation to us, and then we'll have something to put a cost to. Then we'll have something that we can put a value to. Is this something that we're willing to let this piece of land go for? Is this something that we find is going to be an asset to our community? So this is not a heavy lift for us this evening. Next time when we vote to direct the town manager for RFQs, I'm going to be looking forward to seeing what's going to come back, because it could be something really exciting. I don't know what it's going to be, but I am willing to take the chance and find out what it is. And this is the first step to bring this to fruition. This is what we talked about when we said we want to have a housing committee. We unanimously moved that committee forward, and they came back with recommendations. We all have hindsight and say, geez, well, I don't want the 5-story building. Well, maybe none of us do either. But unless we see somebody come forward with a proposal, we don't have to worry about it, just because there's no building there. So, anyways, I'm urging you to take the light weight this evening, move this forward. I think this makes so much sense. It's what we have been talking about. It's what the survey that results that came back for. we are moving our community forward. We're not selling buggy whips out there. We're putting electric cars. We're putting solar panels on our roofs. We are putting heat pumps in our homes. We're not doing what we did yesterday. We're doing something different, and this is the beginning of it.
I do have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion on the motion?
I think there is further discussion. I'm
yeah.
just waiting to hear
I
everybody.
just want to make a couple of comments. There's a bunch of people in the audience who are a little bit older than me that have lived here a little longer than me. I've been a resident of this town for almost 61 years now, and my mom 80 years before me. My mom lived in this town her entire life and now lives over in Hawthorne Court. Hawthorne Court is the biggest benefit to our seniors in this town. And if this project was forward, it would be filled tomorrow with people just like my mom, or Terry, or Kathy. There's a bunch of people in this town that want to stay here that can't afford to. My mom sold her house, and she got enough money out of her house that she can stay in Hawthorne Court for the rest of her life. She doesn't have a tax bill anymore. I know you're shaking your head, Bill. This would be narrow-minded if we didn't do this tonight. It really would. I mean, this is what our seniors and our older people need in this community. Yeah, it will attract some students, but it will attract some 55 and older people too. Steve, you spoke very well. We have had it too good too long. We need to do something to help. And I think this is getting started on the right foot.
So I've been listening to everybody's input because I keep going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. If we do go forward with this, are we the camel's nose under the tent? And that scares me immensely. Because things do happen and we lose control of them. Like we approved the 96 units on Route 1 and 12 of them are affordable. That's another affordable project that we supported. 12 of those apartments on Route 1 and those 4-story buildings behind my house. They exist and they are great. My hairdresser lives there, you know, and she loves it there. And we need more places for the hairdresser to live, for the Ryan Poolers of the world who work at the fire department, or he's just a kid, you know, and he needs a roommate and he needs to live somewhere in town because he wants to be here. You might have children who want to be here that might not want to live with you. Some of you might be living in homes, maintaining a bedroom for kids to come home in case they get in trouble. Maybe you could go to a senior housing and be confident that there might be an apartment across the way for your kid to go to, that they don't have to move back in with you. So those are the ideas that I keep banging back and forth. And I guess I wanted to respond to a few things before I say where I land. One of the things, Bob, you said is dig deeper. And one of the concerns I have is I hear people saying they've dug deep. They've dug so deep in their pockets now have holes in them. You know, and they want to stay where they are and they can't afford to. Terry lives in a beautiful house. Why would she want to live anywhere else? I live in a beautiful house. I built my house on the first floor so that I could live there as an old person. I don't want to be forced to move because I can't pay my property taxes and then pay rent when I own the house I had to sell. You know, it doesn't, even Bill Stiles was like, well, I can't. If he didn't have the land, he built himself a new house. He couldn't build a new house without, you know, making some arrangements for, he couldn't move into rental properties. A rental property at $1,000 a month is $12,000. I don't pay $12,000 a year in taxes, not yet anyway. So that's something. I go back to I have a fiduciary responsibility sitting here on the town council to the people who are already paying their taxes. And that, like you said, Tig, we go through those budget items line by line by line. We are so meticulous in that process. But I was also a teacher at one point. I didn't get married till I was 30 years old, and I had to rent a house with another teacher for a while until I got married, and then we became a two-income family, and then, you know, I could build my house in town. And I keep going back and forth and back and forth. I do think smaller is better. I wanted to respond. I had one comment when Arnold said that 55 plus unit on Route 1 was not near services. Let me tell you, it's closer to the grocery store than Cumberland Center. It's closer to doctor's offices. Since Dr. Hanson left, we don't have any doctors in Cumberland Center. So it depends on what kind of services you need where you might want to live. I think of one of the patrons, one of the renters here at Drown Road School. I see her walking to the library very regularly. That's a service she needs. How does she get her groceries? You know, someone takes her. Terry, I saw you buying groceries for people today. Thanks for your volunteer work. I mean, it's people in our community that help each other out, and I don't want to lose that when we move forward. I think I'm going to support this change in the TIF, but I can't guarantee that I'm going to support proposals that come forward unless they meet pretty strict criteria. I know that we may not have resources for some of the people who may want to live here. There are, quick glance, in the cities that have immigrant families, 20 advertised jobs right now for ELL teachers. Those are English language learner teachers. We have one in our district, and we were looking, Scott Poulin offered it to me twice to get out of retirement to be an ELL tutor. I said, no, thank you very much. I said, I'm not qualified. And he said, we just need a body. And that's not fair to kids, to just put a body in a spot where they need an ELL teacher. So we have to be considerate of those. And, you know, we might be reimbursed down the road. I know how school funding works a little bit, but that's a big expense right off the bat. So you have additional students, but do you have additional students with additional needs, like English language learning? So I'll be looking at those. I embrace diversity. I have a nephew from Senegal. He's a police officer in South Portland. I think diversity is fabulous, but we have to take care of our people. We are diverse. None of us think the same thing already. I'm going to support this for the time being, but please know that I think 55 units there would be a good thing. 55, 55, and 55, we're still 15 more than the 150 the task force is recommending. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That was good, Shirley. I'm not going to support this tonight. And just for the record, I'm not against new, slow, responsible housing projects. Since I've been on the council, I voted for the cluster housing on Casco-Pay Drive, the several apartment buildings on Chelsea Drive. I'm supporting the new construction on Route 1 of the new condos. I voted to change the zoning on Route 1 to allow more housing for 55 and older. I approved the new apartments and condos in back of Cop Motors. And I led the charge to revamp the accessory dwelling ordinance to allow more housing. The town has done a lot for affordable housing. Smallbrook Crossing, 2 different cluster housing projects on Morrison Hill, 2 different condo projects on Route 1, senior housing at Hawthorne Court, Drown Road and all the housing here, all the condos behind that, condos on Main Street by Louis Restaurant. We've done a lot, and I support slow growth. What turned me off from this at the beginning was when I have to read that we're looking at 110 units, 62 in West Cumberland with another 32 rentals, 55 or 60 units down on Route 1. Do the math. If everything comes that was, and I know what they said earlier about the paper, but what was quoted, we're looking at a resident population, if everything's full, between 750 and 1,000 more people in this town. Can we afford to have that kind of population increase all at once? I'm in favor of the 55 project down Route 1. If you want to bring me on board, downsize this. Don't supersize it. And that's what you're asking me to do. I can't. I was looking at some of the emails we received from the town manager this week. He sent these to the council. I'll send you the budget overview this weekend. It's not great. School's up, county's up, and we're going to be up. It's a challenging budget. All we can do is control the town side. Another email, I foresee some very difficult budget years ahead for us, and I truly hope we can prepare now so we can be resilient for what's coming next. We have a great group of employees that work together, and I believe that's what will help us get us through the next few tough years. His quote in the newspaper was, and while day-to-day management of the housing will not impact taxpayers, it would be inaccurate to assume that some portion of tax dollars wouldn't be used. Folks, we've got a lot of stuff going on in this town. We've got places in town that need us to put water there. We've just got presentations by the police, fire, rec, Valhalla. All have major capital projects they want done and need to have done.
Library.
What?
Just
Library,
put my
I'm
plug in
sorry.
for library.
Yeah. And we still haven't finished renovations to the town garage, let alone what the school's going to do. We can't afford to take on all these projects. Like I said, if you want me on board, downsize this. I'm not even close to 110 units. Downsize it. Show me what you're actually going to do. Show me what the impact on the school is going to be. Just show me something and I'll be on board. But right now, you can say whatever you want. This truly is the start of a huge housing project over here. You can try to paint it any other way you want, but that's what it is. When we have approved projects in the past, we had a concept. We have no concept here. And you're asking me to vote and just allow whatever the majority of the councilors want. I can't support it. And I'll be voting no, and until I see something concrete, I'll be voting no on everything else. So, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Right, I have a, go ahead, Steve.
Madam Chair, I sense that you're approaching a vote, so I'll be really quick. I don't envy you folks at all. This is the first of a series of very tough, demanding decisions you're going to have to make. But what each of you have expressed in different ways is vision, and that's what's going to see you through to the end. And Ron, I'm really glad that you mentioned Hawthorne Court. There may not be too many people in the room, but I know that Bill Stiles is among them, and Bob and Ron. But do you remember what Hawthorne Court was when the town acquired it? A bunch of foundation holes in the ground owned by a bankrupt developer. And the town saw an opportunity for its first affordable senior housing project. So it bought the land, became a landlord. All of those units were occupied from day one and have been so since, and from day one there's been a waiting list a mile long. That was an example of how the then council exercised its vision on what was a very unappealing and not very certain project, just a bunch of dirt holes in the ground. And look what it became. So use your vision, you'll get to where you need to be.
All right, got a motion and a second. Further discussion from the council? All those in favor? All those opposed? Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Do one of your phones going off with an alarm right now? Somebody's phone has been going off for about 5 minutes, and it's got to be something close to a microphone.
Mine's off.
No, it's music or something.
Yeah, it's out there.
But it could be out coming over the speakers. Our speakers are everywhere.
Thank you so much.
Okay, we'll find it later.
Sorry. I know everyone's packing up. I do want to say thank you for everyone for coming this evening. It's so important, and so often this audience is empty, and I just want to say thank you, everybody, for coming and participating and sharing your thoughts and sharing your presence. I know this was a long item, and so do appreciate you all staying for the full discussion. All right. 23-026, to hold a public hearing to consider and act on a mass gathering permit for the Garden Brothers Circus to be held August 24th through the 27th at the Cumberland Fairgrounds. Taking a hard left. So this is, we had this, this event at the Cumberland Fairgrounds last year. That was the first time. I know there was some concerns. Personally, I was one that voiced them just based on some kind of notes about this owner. But I know our animal control officer and others all kind of went to the fairgrounds, observed, and there were no incidents. There were no kind of concerns voiced by citizens. So I do just say that because I know that was a topic. Any comments or questions from the council? Go ahead, Shirley.
I'm just very concerned that this is so close to the Cumberland Fair and that they have enough time to be ready to set up for the fair. I know it's the second week in September, but the preparation for the fair happens well in advance. But I'm guessing that since they are extending a lease to this Garden Brothers Family Circus, that they feel confident they're going to be ready for the fair. So I will make a motion if you want one.
Sure.
I move to approve the mass gathering permit for the Garden Brothers Circus to be held August 24th through 27th at the Cumberland Fairgrounds.
Second.
Thank you. This is a public hearing. Are there any comments from the public on this item? Any further comments or questions from the council? All those in favor? Thank you. 23-027, to hold a public hearing to consider and act on a liquor license renewal for Louis Grill LLC.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Any questions or comments from the public? All those in favor? Thank you. 23-028, to authorize the Lands and Conservation Commission to spend a $4,950 grant from Casco Bay Estuary Partnership for landowner education on low-impact landscaping for the health of Casco Bay. So this was a grant that was written by Denny Gallaudet and was earned, and so this is just the authorization for them to spend that money as outlined in that grant. Any questions or comments from the council? Go ahead, Tick.
Yeah, I would, one, just I think we talked about this a little bit last time, but the goal of this is to kind of communicate with town residents about actions that they can take to enhance the health of the coastline, Broad Cove, including reducing the levels of polluted runoff from landscaping. Might keep me honest if hopefully I didn't miss anything there. But also wanted to do a big thanks to Ivy Frignoka, who I believe wrote a very, very passionate letter to go along with the grant and was kind of instrumental in making sure we got this funding. So super proud of her and for Denny Denny is just always being Denny and always making magic happen on sustainability. So great kind of teamwork and tag teaming there. So really excited about this.
Would you like to make a motion?
I would love to make a motion. I move to authorize the Lands and Conservation Commission to spend a $4,950 grant from Casco Bay Estuary Partnership for landowner education on low-impact landscaping for the health of Casco Bay.
Second.
Thank you. Any comments from the public? Any questions or comments from the council? All those in favor? Thank you. Moving to new business, as I mentioned earlier, we did just have, prior to this meeting, a budget workshop, and we'll have one again from 5 to 7 prior to our April 10th and our April 24th council meetings. And then that culminates with a full review of the proposed budget, again on Saturday, April 29th, beginning at 8 a.m. into completion. And then we would formally vote at our next meeting. Also, just a reminder, nomination papers are available now and must be returned by April 13th. And Shirley, I'll let you hit on that last item under new business, if you so.
She might not know what it is.
Oh, okay. Or that might be Bill's future comments that he noted.
To send to the ordinance committee.
Go ahead,
Which means
Bill.
it hasn't come to me
Yeah.
yet. Phew.
We have a request from a developer to add a commercial component to the PACE ordinance. It's no cost to the town, it's managed by Efficiency Maine, but I thought it'd be worthwhile to bring it to you to see if you wanted to move that forward, and it would go to the ordinance committee for discussion and be back to you either in 2 or 4 weeks, depending on how quickly we could turn that around.
Yeah, I think that
Bring it on.
affirmative.
Thank you. I do
Did
have
you have, yeah, I was gonna
one more small thing. We were successful in obtaining a $9,000 grant for the active living program. Devin had applied for a grant through the Southern Maine Agency on Aging and received a $9,000 grant to sponsor the luncheons for the next 18 months at our active living program. She holds a luncheon every month at the banquet, the Recreation Center at Valhalla, and we are very excited to see that. That's the second grant that Devin has been successful in acquiring in a very short period of time, so we're pretty excited to let you know about that.
That's wonderful, thank you. Shirley?
You're going to start with me? All right, the only thing I've had since our last meeting was a library meeting, and we continue to discuss space needs for the library programming. There was a good deal of discussion about, what the advisory committee would like to see in a new assistant director of the library. Those interviews, I'm sure, are coming up pretty soon. So, and there are 2 people from the advisory committee on the interview committee. So that was part of the discussion. They discussed usage of the Prince Room and how long you could sign up ahead of time. And they landed on, if it's not broken, don't fix it right now. But there could be a time in the future where we have to decide what the criteria are for library spaces. I'd like to do this was totally unexpected, but I'd like to share it with you. A while back, we were debating what farms could do to help generate income. And we have an ordinance that allows farms to have weddings or whatever things, but that was not an easily passed ordinance. And there was a gentleman there, his name is Josh Houghton, and he was a neighbor of one of these farms. And I'm just going to read one paragraph of this letter he sent me. He said that he remembers that meeting, and he said the legislation for that got a bit contentious. During one of the town meetings, I recall a larger-than-life character stepping up and scolding the councilors, which got them into line pretty quick. This person was, of course, your father. Being the child of a town political figure myself, there are many aspects of growing up I can relate to with such a father. I had never met the man before or since, but he certainly had a way about him. His straight to the point, keep your nose out of my barn citation was absolutely perfect. And then he sent me this wonderful little sign that says, keep your nose out of my barn, Cumberland, Maine, the way life should be. So I just want to say thank you to Josh, and what a thoughtful gesture. And that's all I have.
How do I follow that?
I know.
I want to thank everybody for the discussion tonight, and I just want to drive a point home that don't take the passion on regardless of which side of the aisle or which side of the issue we were on. My respect for the other counselors is immense. We disagree, but that's good people disagree. And that's what good politics is about. So I enjoyed it. The conversation, it was an eye-opener for me, and I think for a lot of people in the audience. And I do appreciate everybody's passion on this tonight, very much. That's all I have, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would agree and just echo kind of what Councilor Eads just mentioned. I really appreciate everyone coming in tonight to bounce these ideas around, the people who adamantly disagree with any type of affordable housing being built, to the people who say, let's make it smaller and maybe more fitting to the community, to the people who say, to the max, let's do what we're able to do. I really want to thank the members of the Housing Task Force, 2 of whom spoke this evening, because I do think that they represent a little bit of those different perspectives and spectrums on the issue. And so I encourage everyone to continue coming back, continue raising your concerns. This is a group and community effort, and I want everyone to be involved. So with that, thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Yeah, I'll echo what everybody else said. I spent 15 years on the planning board, and I spent 15 years on the school board. And I think this is the one time that I feel good about being in control of my future, of what I want this face of this town to look like. Because when I was on the planning board, I had no control. It was more or less a rubber stamp of the developer. As long as a developer came in and presented a project that met the criteria, he was good to go. And we lost vast sums of acreage in this community by developers who only had their own interest at heart of making a buck and moving on. And some of them may have had some altruistic thoughts, but most of them didn't. But I think tonight we made the first step in us being in control. And that's a real important distinction to make here. About where we're going is that, yes, we're going to put out an RFP, an RFQ, and we're going to get some proposals, but we're in the driver's seat this time, and the face of it is going to look like what we want it to look like, because we can control that. We can tell the developer it's too big, it's too all-encompassing, it doesn't do enough, it's not inclusive enough. All those sorts of things. So this is a distinct difference that, to me, that I feel that I can feel good about. And you know, we can talk about our relationship with the school, and the only thing that we have to do is say that we can get down and work harder, because that's our choice. We can work harder and make the relationship with the school better. If we don't, it's to our own fault. I do have one item of curiosity. It was Bill sent a proposed ordinance to the town of, I want to say Waldeboro, am I correct? Waldeboro. But again, we talk about zoning, and one thing that we have any control of zoning is what goes on 10 feet in front of the shoreline. Anybody can come in and create a nuisance, if you will. I can put aquaculture. And so the town of Waldeboro drafted an ordinance, and I'm hoping that I can get the town manager to follow up with our legislators, Steve Moriarty and the senator, that allows us to have put some teeth into controlling what happens, because what we have is a residential neighborhood being impacted by commercial development. And so anytime that we can perhaps add some teeth to that, and so that we can have a little bit of local control is important to us. It's important to me. That's all I got.
I have a couple, and yes, I echo the sentiments of people in the audience, residents, as well as fellow counselors, really earnestly and with lots of passion, just expressing kind of their thoughts. I haven't been here that long on the council. My strategy has always been 2 ears and 1 mouth. I feel as though tonight, not only from my fellow counselors, but also from the people in the group, that I'll be walking away with just a lot of stuff to think through and a lot of stuff to process. And if anything, I think that what I love so much about all of the people sitting next to me and all of the people in the audience is that we continue to have those dialogues, and I hope they continue to come back. And, you know, once we actually have a plan to look at, that we can continue to discuss that earnestly, even knowing, though, that we're not going to always agree on everything, and that's okay. In terms of fun things coming down the vine, I think with the Lands and Conservation Commission, we have an orchard walk scheduled on April 27th at 2 o'clock to see the town the orchard and what's. Did I get the right date, Mike? Okay, perfect. So if anyone's available to do that, mark that on your calendars. We also have some potential ordinances for the Coastal Waters Commission forthcoming, some updates forthcoming. So stay tuned there. And then finally, I think Bill, Whitney, and I are headed off next week to the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Immersion Workshop on April 4th. That's being run through MMA, and we'll be happy to present any little golden nuggets that we learned during what hopefully is going to be an awesome conference. So that's it for me.
My good friend Dean has donated $20 to the food pantry, and I myself. I want to thank everybody tonight. It got heated at times, but I think in the end, everything will work out. If you think tonight's meeting was long, wait until we get a dance partner. But I think we all are going in the right direction. I mean, we will work this out one way or another. I mean, and that's why we're here. That's all I have.
Madam Chair?
Oh, good.
I just have one thing. You all received an invitation to the Cumberland Public Safety Annual Banquet, and that's before our next meeting, I believe. It's April 8th. I would recommend it. I try to go there every year. I don't stay for the hooligans after, as the night wears on.
Come on, Shirley.
Oh, but they appreciate, let me just say this, they really appreciate your attendance when you are able to attend. So I just want to put a plug out there for that. Hope to see you there.
I just had 2 things, both related to the school. So one is I promised a fellow chair of our school board that I would behoove anyone and everyone to just take notice. There is a request. They are looking for new land opportunities for the school. They had done this before, but they are going out again. So Scott Pooland is who you should reach out to. I know Whitney noted it in the crier, but again, I just say that anyone, if you know anyone with large land property parcels, or you have any, at least to have the conversation, if it's something you'd be interested in, at least understanding what those options are and talking to the school district. The other is that I had the wonderful opportunity of going to see the school production of Little Shop of Horrors with my 2 boys this weekend. And it was wonderful to look around and see every generation, kids, you know, parents of kids that were in the show. I have no children in high school. They are littles. But everyone, and it reminded me, and I think about kind of going to Merrill Auditorium is sometimes cost prohibitive. And this show was amazing, and to have it right there, I know there's a lot of kind of bad juju around that Performing Arts Center, but that was an amazing facility, what they were able to do between lighting and sound and the new drama director there and how they're incorporating classroom work to what that show was as well, I think is just amazing. Also come as shocker. I was in musical theater growing up, and it had a profound effect on me. And so I just love having it in our community and being able to share that with my children.
Is there any video you can share of that?
Oh, there is. It's just on VHS. But it was just wonderful, and just a wonderful community event. You talk about libraries and culture, having that type of a facility and being able to have those performances done by our students to share with their full community is just great. So thank you to them. That's all I had. Then I will take a motion for adjournment.
Did Bill have something else?
Nope, he's good.
So moved. Second?
Wonderful. All those in favor? Thank you.
Okay. Wow.
Good to see you, Mike.
Well.
I probably won't be able to sleep because there's all this.
That's
dark
a lot.
chocolate.
Those are